Good afternoon to everyone. One of the well-known policies of Israel is to change the goalposts. For example, in 1948, its main issue was expulsion of refugees, and then they changed the attack into the people who want to return, and they call them infiltrator. And then there are issue of the armistice line, and then there are issue attack of Egypt, and then Jordan waters, and then 1956 and 1967, and Oslo, and so on. This policy is intended to make the people of the world be engaged with the latest violation of Israel and forget the main issue. We Palestinians never fall to this trick. We have always to stick to the root of the problem, namely the Nakba. And Nakba is the most tragic event in Palestine history for 4,000 years. And Nakba means the expulsion of 560 towns and villages, the population of those cities, and making them refugees. Today, they are 2/3 of the Palestinian people. That was 72 years ago, and the situation and the root of the question has not changed at all. In 1948, we must remember the Zionist invasion of Palestine. It was not the Arab invasion. The Zionist invasion of Palestine by 9 brigades, by 120,000 soldiers in 39 military operations, conquered Palestine and changed the Jewish hold on Palestinian land from 6% under the British to 78% by 1949. Now they occupied the West Bank and Gaza, and previously in Lebanon and Sinai, and now also on Golan Heights. So this is the problem. We cannot solve the situation or deal with it unless we look at the root of the problem, namely the Nakba. This major historical crime against the people is still with us today, and it's growing. Israel is occupying the West Bank and blockading Gaza and ready to do more. How could this happen? How could it even continue? Every single line of international law is against it. Tens of UN resolutions are calling for the refugees to return home. But who is undermining international law? It's the US, Britain, and Israel, those same colonial powers which created Israel in the first place. Israel is the only colonial project today. Israel is the only country which practices racism within 55 laws. Israel is the only country in the world which practices apartheid as its official policy. Israel is the only country in the world which proclaims another country, namely Palestine, as the nation state of all the Jews in any nationality anywhere in the world. But how come? How come the Palestinian refugees are denied the right to return home, although the UN passed Resolution 194 calling for the return 135 times so far, longer than any resolution in UN history? How come they were denied this inalienable right for 72 years? But during these 72 years, the West did not stop hurting the Palestinians. The West did not stop denying them their right of return. What did they do? They advanced 55 so-called peace plans in order to solve the problem, they say, in the Middle East. But none of these 55 peace plans complies with international law. None of them call for the return of the refugees. all of them condone the massacres and occupation and war crimes committed by Israel as something in the past. We don't have to discuss it. All of them accept the Zionist conquest of Palestine. All of them accept the expulsion of Palestinians anywhere in the world and finding ways to feed them in their exile, not to return home. Now, here you have the colonial legacy still applies with vengeance in Palestine. Now, here also you have the new version of the Crusaders' war in Palestine, reincarnated in the name of the holy books, used as an instrument of occupation. What a state we live in today. What a state. The age of freedom and liberty. The age of mass communication, where the truth, not lies, should shine in the daylight. 72 years of exile, 72 years of Samud, 72 years of denial of basic justice. But it is the sign of the resilience of the Palestinian people who refused to be carved away from their homeland by European settlers who came to their shores in a smuggler's ship in the middle of the night. Today, the Palestinians are 13 million. 8 of them are refugees, whether registered or not registered. Half of the 13 million are still on the soil of Palestine, but under Israeli colonial rule. The other half are refugees, mostly outside Palestinian border. In the year 2030, we will be 18 million people. So we have no intention of going away. We have no intention of forfeiting Palestine for the ghetto dwellers in Europe who came to take our land. Let me tell you something. When we talk about right of return, we don't dream of the right of return. We do not only demand the right of return, but we actually plan for it. Yes, we plan for it. We have a database of all the refugees. We know their names and families. We know their place of origin. We have plans of the design or the plan of their villages, how they looked like. We have aerial photos of their houses. We know the names of the house owners. We know their land property. We know in which refugee camp they live today. So it will not be a big job to chart the road from their camp to their home. By the way, it's never more than 30 kilometers. Many of them can actually see their homes across the barbed wire. They can even walk to it. They don't need ships and airplanes like the settlers do. And when they return, they will find their houses destroyed by Israel to prevent their return. We know that. But no matter, we have engineers and labor who already built much larger projects. For some years now, we at Palestine Land Society started an annual competition for young architectural graduates to redesign their villages. We give them the data and they do the design. And the results are judged by international jury in London every year. And what is the verdict of the international jury? They say that these Palestinians, young architects, are quite capable of rebuilding Palestine again by its own people. Now, who are the people in our land today? We also looked at the village land as it is today, and who are the squatters there, and where do they come from, and what they do. We created an atlas to show that, what it was, what it is today. And we found, contrary to many of Israeli lies, that the refugee village lands are still empty. I say empty. As an engineer and planner, I say empty. How is that? 87% of Israeli Jews are still live in only 12% of Israel's area. Most refugee land outside three major areas are still vacant or sparsely populated by the kibbutz. The kibbutz comprise 1 to 2% of Israeli Jews, and their numbers are dwindling now. They are older, and there are no new people coming in. And then who controls all this land? Israeli army controls 88% for military purposes. And therefore, it is not wrong to conclude, as many experts have concluded already, that Israel is really a huge military base designed to wage wars and sow death and destruction in the area. So it's an army which has a state. Take the Gaza Strip, for example. This is the largest open prison on earth, the largest sustained war-created concentration camp. Today, it has 2 million people. People keep talking about that, but the Western media doesn't bother to explain why it is crowded. It is crowded because Israel committed war crimes and they depopulated 247 villages in southern Palestine. Their land, their villages were in half of Palestine, southern part, 50%. Israel crammed them in what's called now Gaza Strip, which is 1.3% of Palestine. So the people who lived in 50% of Palestine, now they crammed to be living in 1.3% of Palestine. The density of population in Gaza Strip is at least 7,000 persons per square kilometer. And who lives in the land of those refugees? A few kibbutz. You look at the satellite picture, you find very few kibbutz. And their density is seven persons per square kilometer. 7,000 in Gaza, and the squatters and settlers are 7 persons per square kilometer. Take my own case. My village is called Al Ma'in. It's right on the barbed wire on the Gaza Strip. We can see our land. The area of our land is 6 by 8 kilometers, owned by my family, Abu Sitta family. There is a kibbutz on it called Nirim. There are 3 others. And Nirim is situated on my father's land. It has 174 registered members in the kibbutz. 174. And how many are Abu Sitta in the Gaza Strip? 1 kilometer away, 10,000. And they are looking at their land by eyesight. So you must have seen the young people in Gaza Strip in the Great Return March, protesting, flying kites, demanding the right to return. They are met by Israeli snipers who killed and maimed hundreds, maybe thousands. And I can tell you, the crimes which have been committed in World War II are reincarnated by Israel in Palestine and before the cameras, not in history books. So those young people did not forget their land. And not only them, the other young Palestinians in USA and Europe are doing the same. In mid-May, only 2 weeks ago, I had the pleasure of speaking to 600 young people in one event organized by PYM, Palestinian Youth Movement in the United States. What did they want? Their slogan, they demanded liberation of Palestine and the right of return. So Ben Gurion hoped that the young would forget. Well, they didn't. and they are as adamant as their father and grandfather on the right of return. And now all our studies led to one conclusion. Every time we turn it around, we come to the same conclusion. This conclusion is there is no legal reason, no geographical reason, no economic reason, no logistical reason to prevent the return of the refugees according to international law. So what's the reason then why they could not return? The reason is Israel's Zionism, racism, apartheid, and occupation. And these must be abolished. These must be abolished. That's the only way for the future. And they must be abolished like all the evils which the world has got rid of since the Second World War. And the Western powers which continue to maintain the legacy of Balfour and in actual fact politically employing suicide on Palestinians, this must stop. And in terms of Palestinians themselves, they will continue in their sumud. They also have to build their community structure, which is now 13 million, as I say, and build a new elected Palestine National Council in which they are to be fully represented. There is a great reservoir of goodwill people in the world. I travel all around from Japan to San Francisco. I see young people around the world who are supporting us, especially from Europe and even from America. The governments of America and Britain are still against us. Regrettably, Australia, for example, Australia was the only country last week to vote against the self-determination of Palestinians. But its neighbor, New Zealand, we had many good friends in New Zealand. The Parliament of New Zealand was the one who enforced Resolution 236, which disallowed the settlements on Palestinian land. So the future is ours. And the young people will never give up their right of return. And our demand, the young Palestinians and the old Palestinians and all the people of free conscience, they have one demand. Palestine is our country, and we must return to it, and return to it we will. Thank you.